Okay, and I'm going to put this link also in the chat here if I can. Oh, I don't know. I think I put the wrong link. Okay, never mind that, you guys. Hold on. I thought I had that copied. It's weird. Try this again.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, but you sound like maybe you're farther back, to me anyway.
Okay, I just changed my microphone. I can try that different though. Better?
Yeah, that's better.
It is better. Okay.
Okay, forget that. That's not working. All right, I guess forget it. I don't know. I was trying to copy your link onto my chat down there, but it doesn't seem to be working properly. So I don't know why. Hey everyone, I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot and very happy to be here today. So I've got Daniel and Derek, and they're from Shred the Veil. And we're going to be talking about their grandfather and his book. And sad to say, he is no longer with us. So I guess we can say anything we want. No, just kidding. But anyway, so guys, I've been on your show in the past. So glad to return the favor. And why don't you introduce yourselves? One of you could take the lead, and then let's have the other one, sort of follow it up with their own personal stuff as well.
Yeah, Dan, you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So Derek and I were born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. Both became mechanical engineers and had pretty normal lives. But when we were teenagers, our grandfather told us about UFOs and aliens and extraterrestrials, and that he had encounters with them and all kinds of crazy stories that we weren't really sure how to handle back then. This was like in the mid '90s when he started talking about this, kind of out of the blue. Growing up before that, he had never mentioned it, and I guess at that point in his career, he felt safe doing so to some capacity. Um, and so Yes, then we found out several years later that he was part of Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure project in 2001, one of the 21 witnesses that came forward in the National Press Club hearing in Washington, D.C. that day. And we didn't actually know about that when it happened until further 2003 when he came up with his book, Life with a Cosmos Clearance. And then we had no idea the amount of information that he had. Um, he claimed to have a top secret clearance, but that was 38 levels above top secret, which is a Cosmos clearance. And yeah, his book is just full of interesting information about the history of the UFOs, crash retrievals over the last 80 years, and secrets the government's been keeping from us, his encounters, his personal experiences. It's a fascinating book for sure, kind of like a handbook for the disclosure community. I would say it's been called by others. And yeah, over the last 20 years, Derek and I have been trying to find corroborating information, which we've actually been successful with. So it's kind of led us on our journey to start our podcast, Shred the Veil, and talk to other people who have experienced similar things, and trying to validate some of the information from our grandfather. As he passed away shortly after writing the book, and towards the end of his life, he was kind of deteriorating mentally. He had a lot of mini strokes and things like that. So he wasn't able to really, when he came out with this information, we really didn't have a chance to talk to him about it at all, really. So the only times we really had those discussions with him was back when we were teenagers. And at that time, he was telling me about Nazis in Antarctica and UFOs down there, the Philadelphia experiment, time travel, ETs materializing into our universe so that we could see them physically, and just stuff that blew my mind. And quite honestly, I didn't know what to believe because I'd never heard anything like that before. My parents weren't really um, validating anything either. It was news to them. And so kind of sat with that for a long time until he came out with this book. And then as I described, we went down our journey of trying to validate these things, and unfortunately, the timing was such that we didn't really get to talk to him about the material. So that's kind of the mystery of it, is to for us anyway, is on this journey of discovery to find out what's true and what he really was involved with, and we keep on opening up more doors. So it's getting kind of exciting for us. But those are some of my personal experiences and the things that he talked to me about. But Derek, I'm sure, has different ones.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can briefly, add to that. And I'm 4 years, actually 4 years younger than Danny. So he kind of got more of a one-on-one, I guess, more like, okay, these are the things that I want to share. These are the stories. These are the types of technology, types of situations that I've encountered, or I've read about, and our grandfather would share that with him. But with me, maybe he felt like he kind of already got it off his chest, maybe. So I didn't get that kind of information from him, but I spent a lot of time with him. And I remember even driving to Dulce, the Archuleta Mesa, with him, and having an encounter where they basically just, these black unmarked SUV came up behind us and was being very intimidating to say you should leave. And I'm pretty sure they were just tracking him, because all we were doing is driving through the area. Anybody does that on a regular basis. But now that I look back on it, it's like there had to be a reason why they didn't want him there. So we just had to leave. And that was when I was a teenager. But I spent many summers in Taos with him. And like my brother said, we would go visit him in Taos, New Mexico while he was there, and the later part of his years. When it comes to this book, though, like my brother said, it's like a conspiracy theorist's wildest dreams. Like, best to put it all into one book. It's like, well, how much of this is true? Is it all true? What can we make a sense of it? Because I was a huge skeptic of it when it came out, because we hear our grandfather just mentioning aliens offhand and saying this and that, but the detail, the amount of detail and story and information that's shared in this book is amazing. So we were trying to make sense of that. And of course, we don't have rights to this book. We don't make money off of this book. So it's only been the last few years where it's like, well, these encounters and all the data points start to add up. And over the years, we see, with even in the mainstream and just all the other people coming out, the whistleblowers, all the testimony, and we're seeing, hey, maybe he actually had something too. There's something about what he was trying to say that still needs to be shared. And we felt it really validated a lot of the last 20 years has validated what he said. So that's kind of why we're speaking now. And obviously it was with Dr. Greer at the beginning, and Dr. Greer is still such a big part of the movement. And I know you don't agree with everything Dr. Greer says and his point of view, and we're kind of in the same stance as well. I think there's so much that we could discuss later about the narrative and the limited hangout and things that are happening now that you see.
For sure. Okay. Well, I did. I don't know. You had something written about the book, and I was actually trying to figure out. Now, I want to get the book. I'd love to get the book, but what I'm wondering is, what I'm interested in is his story. You know what I mean? But
Yep.
I noticed that there's a lot of, or at least the way you guys framed it in what I saw, seemed to be a lot of stuff from other people that, people like, Phil Schneider and this one and that one. And of course I know, okay, so I know those portions of the story. Of course, if he wants to add something of his own there, that would be interesting. And I don't know if you've kind of been able to parse those things out. But maybe we could start with an overview of his story, like how he got involved. I hope some of that, or some of it's in the book.
Of course, yeah. I'll let Dan summarize and I'll fill in the gaps.
Sure. Okay, so he was born in 1928. He joined the U.S. Air Force in 1947 when it was first established. Really, it was part of the Army originally, and shortly after that, he had his first encounter at Warner Robins Air Force Base in Georgia in 1949. His specialty was in radar. He was head of a radar unit there, and they were running these tests against Strategic Air Command where they would try to pick up things on the radar and testing some things out, new technologies and whatnot. And so they were doing this at the base. And at one point, him and his entire team, they saw 3 UFOs essentially hovering in space, a couple miles away in the sky. And they saw them there visually. And then they went down and tried to pick them up on the radar. And they did show up on the radar. And then they took off and just completely just disappeared at speeds way beyond the technology that the Air Force was aware of at the time, had any capabilities of doing so. And they confirmed the speeds with the radar. It was thousands of miles per hour that these things just shot away. And they actually got real-time photograph, like film photographs of it, and they reported it to Heineke at the time was in charge of those kinds of reports and things like that. And basically they were told never to speak of it again. And the photos were taken away. And that was kind of the end of that first encounter, but that was early in his career. So right from the get-go, he kind of was in the know of certain things. And that kind of led him into these higher clearances and access levels. He was also a Conrad courier and during Eisenhower's time, which is they basically carry the war codes and travel wherever, before the president gets there or whatever. And so he had cryptographic clearance through that. And with that clearance, which through the Freedom of Information Act, we have validated that he did have that crypto clearance on record, that he had access to a lot of information that was going through Langley at the time and those higher level classified information. And then he also worked with Benoit Mandelbrot, who was higher up in some of these projects, developing different things. And through his time and working with people that had clearances above him, he kept getting access to more and more along the way. So over his career, that took him through 1968. Over those years, he became what I guess the predecessor to what we call like the Men in Black. He was part of Project Blue Book, where his job was to go around and convince people that if they saw something, some kind of encounter or anything, that it really wasn't what they thought it was. Whatever story they came up with at the time, whatever they're telling him in swamp gas, those whatever it was. So he was part of the first team that would go around and do that and try to convince them or talk them out of believing that they saw something that was off this planet. And he talks about in his book, if he was not successful or his section of the team was not successful, then the second team would come in. And that's where they would get into the threats, the blackmail, they're threatening their lives or their families' lives. And he said there was a third team of, contract people. He calls them the double O boys, the whack and hunt assassins that would come in and finish the problem if it really have to get to that point. So,
okay, so he worked with Alan Hynek.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he said he knew Alan Hynek and what Hynek was doing, I think more for the civilian crowd. He was asking civilians, okay, what did they saw? Get all the information and, put it into Project Blue Book. Well, our grandfather said he did that on the military side with any military civilians and family and trying to say, no, you didn't see that, whatever reason swamp.
Right. Now, and I want you to go on, but I have to ask this. So did he ever reveal, like, what was his motivation? Did you get any psychological, if you will, kind of profile or look at him as to, he sounds like he was a really, I guess you might say, ambitious member of the military. So, but he also managed to stay among them and to be promoted. So did you ever kind of get a psychological fix on, or even from his, I don't know, your grandmother or for people around him that explained, like, what was his motivation? Do you know?
I think he was, certainly just fascinated by it, interested in it. And as he was learning more with he became like a team member inadvertently, kind of learning too much, working with people that were on his team in the higher projects. And they basically had to vet him out. He talks about going through a lot of psychological testing, all kinds of testing before they would clear him to to move on. But once they knew that he knew certain ththings, they're like, okay, well, they had to make a decision: do we get rid of this guy or do we trust him enough? And that's
Right.
when the testing began. So
Well,
I think
who
it was
was
just
his, well, sorry to interrupt, but who was his mentor? Do you happen to know if, did he have a specific mentor that he would mention at all?
not
Benoit
necessarily
Mandelbrot
mentor.
was the
He did say
main.
Benoit Mandelbrot was the one he was working next to on some of these projects. The one he mentions is the Mode 6 transponder, the black box, and all the airplanes that are used today for tracking purposes. Some of the initial things, but
But
that's
that
the only
might
person that
only
he's
be,
named.
yeah, it might only be the one that people in the public would know who that name
Right.
is. I don't think he's
Yeah.
going to reveal who else he'd be working with, and that's the other part. He's good at keeping secrets, obviously, and he
Well, okay, but okay, let's put it this way. Did he have a person who was, sort of head at that time that either he reported to on some level or he, was well known around and around? Because we know Eisenhower's name, for example, and we know there's a pecking order. We know there's MJ-12, but there are members, even we know the members of MJ-12, for example, Vannevar Bush, for example. I mean, so I'm trying to place him in the framework, if you will.
he would never say names like that, but he knew of them all. He mentioned Vannevar Bush and the fact that MJ-12 was started by that Truman memo
Right.
to Forstall, but he would never say directly who he had contact with other than Mandelbrot. I think he felt that was harmless, maybe.
Oh, all
I
right.
think he was trying to be very careful. He in the whole book, I'll just put it this way, he doesn't give any documents or anything that can't be found in the public domain. And he did that to save his own skin and probably to keep his family safe too. I mean, and by the way, he was the only one from the Disclosure Project with Dr. Greer. When he went up to speak, he froze up and he got in a panic and they had to get him off the stage. And
Oh,
then
wow.
he said, I don't want to stay here. He called my mom and said, I want to leave. I don't feel safe. And he left. So
Oh,
even more than Clifford Stone, he probably had some very big intel, big bombs to drop back in that time. And I think he knew his life was going to be in danger, and even our lives if he said something. That's how it seems that now that we look back at it. So
interesting. Okay, that adds another layer. Okay, if you want to go ahead, I'm sorry,
Um,
Daniel. I was just to make sure I can call you
yeah.
guys by the right name. But anyway, so Daniel, can you elaborate as you were saying? Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, another aspect that may have played into his ability to gain the clearances was that we know that he was a Freemason, and his grandfather
Oh,
was
right.
a 33-degree Freemason. We don't know how far up he went in the ranks, but we do about know validated his great grandfather. No, his grandfather, not great grandfather. I'm sorry. Um, but yes, so then when he left the Air Force in 1968, he joined the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, which was not known to the public at the time. It was established probably a decade or two earlier with Eisenhower, but it was not a publicly known organization until the 90s, until that time. And I don't know, maybe that's why in the 90s he felt comfortable coming out with some of the information that he did, just starting to speak about it at least and make what he felt comfortable sharing. But he claims that within the NRO, he was part of the scientific and technical unit of interplanetary phenomena, which is Colonel Corso actually states that was the unit that went to investigate Roswell, that was formed a few years earlier from crashes in
the Battle
California,
of
Los Angeles area. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so was he involved in investigating Roswell? Did he even say that much or not?
Well,
well,
he
that was
just
the same
started.
year that he joined the Air Force. So he
One
was
at a
not
time,
in
and
it.
then I'm very happy to hear both of your takes on it because I know you're brothers, but still you're going to come at it from different points of view. So go ahead,
Go ahead, Derek.
Daniel.
Okay, yeah. So 1947, Roswell, that's the same year that he entered the military. So he was not a part of it from that early on
Okay.
standpoint, but later on he became a part of that unit, and he was involved with extraterrestrial retrievals. So he says his specialties were extraterrestrial crashes, just ET contact in general, and then particleization, which we've kind of pieced together is kind of ties to time travel, as far as we can tell, the way he just described it. Yeah.
Okay, now, was he psychic or a remote viewer?
He knew about it, and what we've been told is that, well, what we kind of from random sources, that dealing with time travel, it seemed like that whole looking glass type of subject, being a precog, that all had something to do with it. So I think they experimented with him and used him as one of the earliest people in whatever they would, maybe they didn't even call it remote viewing back then, but
Sure, that's right.
involved with it. Yeah.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, does he mention Project Looking Glass in his book?
He doesn't specifically say that one. I
All
don't
right.
believe.
Okay, and then did you have any other thing to add to what Daniel was saying about his interactions with Roswell? And I have a reason for asking these particular questions. So, Roswell and Corso. So, did you have, was there any more information you can give me that he had interaction with that?
I would say just from there's interesting enough, there's some video that we found online that came out from his interviews he did in, looked like, mid to late 90s, that we had no idea he even did that. But that's the best testimony we have on record, is it's still on YouTube, and it has like Brazilian or Portuguese subtitles, because I guess the South America are the ones that got access to it and wanted to get it out there. But he was talking about Roswell in that interview. He talks about many things, which is very interesting to go back and see his train of thought. And
Okay, well, do you have a link to that?
we can get it to you. Yeah, I think
If you would, because I think that would fill in the gaps and give people a picture of this person. Because,
Yep.
this is kind of an unusual interview kind of thing. I mean, for me and people to listen to, because you're, relatives, and you're not even his sons, you're his grandsons, right? Correct? So what we're trying to do is see the man through you, right? And for those who haven't read his book, obviously, and it sounds like his book was pretty much cleansed a law, let's say in this modern day age, Lou Elizondo, who just released a book, and, I'm sure that's plenty cleansed. So, whereas it can have some good information and some clues, which these people managed to put into their books, by the way. So it's
Right.
not a complete waste of time to read. But at the same time, you have to be really astute to be able to add those, link those dots together.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious, did he talk about Corso?
In the book, he does mention Corso, and that's why he was tied to that specific unit.
Did he talk about it at all between either of you?
No, like I
No.
said, Dan probably had the most interaction, but no, not with me. No.
So, I mean, some of the stories he would tell me, again, this was when I was a teenager. He talked about Roswell. He described the whole thing to me, and then he also talked about MJ12 a lot and described them to me. But yeah, that's as far as I don't, since the timing of it was such that it was when he first started. I don't know that he was directly involved. I would say.
Did he know John Lair?
I don't know that either. Because
Okay.
he would not name drop when he talks about stuff. It would be very like philosophical, like, oh yeah, aliens are here, and by the way, I'm from.
Well, John Lear was famous,
Yeah, I
he's
know
been
John
famous
Lear.
the whole time. So did he
Like,
know Bob Dean? I mean, these people are probably almost contemporaries of his. They have passed on as well.
so
So,
in the book, he mentions specifically Phil Schneider, and I know for sure he knew of Phil Schneider in the 90s, because I saw a VHS tape of Phil Schneider at his house, and he's bringing people over to watch this, and I'm like, well, there's a reason he's interested, but this is completely new to me. So I knew for sure he was in that world. He was definitely in that world.
right.
He says that what Bill Cooper did for the Navy, he did for the Air Force. Like he was talking to all these people. I have records of him going to one of the first conferences Alex Collier ever did, and I have the documentation for that, and which is nice to see that he
That's
was
cool.
back then. So I know you just interviewed Bob Wood's son,
Yeah, Ryan Wood. Uh-huh.
Ryan Wood, and so there's a letter that I actually have from my grandfather corresponding with whoever the public person is for Ryan and Bob Wood at the time to say, this is how you contact them. We'll give you your information to give so they can validate the MJ12 documents. It was based on that, and that was why
Oh.
they were
Our,
talking.
yeah, our
Mhm.
grandfather was providing the material back. This was like in the late 90s time
Yeah,
frame.
Okay.
97, yeah, something like that.
But yeah, but in his book, he says he was friends with Phil Schneider and Bill Cooper. Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of interesting because, well, let me just say these things. So Roswell actually, now I have to be a little careful, but we got death threats over an investigation we did connected to Roswell, believe it or not. And so there is some things I know about Roswell that aren't commonly talked about. So I was just wondering, obviously he didn't have a tape recorder when you were hanging out with him, but I'm just wondering if because a person, when they talk, they might let things slip because they are, they're talking to your relatives, and they might just say a throwaway line that you didn't pay attention to necessarily, but you know what I'm saying? It could have contained some interesting information that the rest of us would love to know. And because it's in that setting that, it could have some more validity than even certain other things. So did he, so was he, well, let me say this. So he had colleagues and he had a support system. That much sounds reasonable. But did he ever, talk about being afraid, or I know you said that on the Stephen Greer thing that was kind of like a big thing, but after that or before that, or were you aware of, or did your grandmother ever talk? I'm just trying to see, was there any kind of atmosphere around him, would you say, in that way?
He never really seemed like one to be afraid of anything, or he was just like, well, this is the way it is, and I'm going to tell you, this is what I know. And he, like we said, he never said anything to the family until 93, and I was about 10, and I remember the day. I remember exactly. We went to our mom's kitchen table, and she said, come sit down. Your grandfather has something to tell you about UFOs he saw, and he told us that whole story.
Oh.
And that was the first of it. And from that point on, he was trying to get in the public domain and talk more. And I think it was because he saw people like Phil Schneider and Bill Cooper with Behold a Pale Horse, and he saw that this needed to come out. People were starting to speak out about it, and he felt it was probably the time to do it as well, because he didn't have much time.
So you would say he was for disclosure of a kind, at least,
Yes. Yeah.
because
Yes.
it also sounds like he was all about keeping his security oath, right?
Yeah. And we talked to Dan Willis, who actually met him at the
You
Disclosure Project
talked to
in 2001.
who?
Dan Willis,
Oh,
because he also testified at the 2001 Disclosure Project. So he said that Dan Willis was telling us that he met our grandfather there. They had coffee that morning, and there was definitely some, a lot of tension. We'll say anxiety about within amongst all of them about coming forward and talking, and was definitely present there.
so okay. I know that I'm like kind of steering this, but I want to understand what he contributed to things. So he starts out in radar, right? And then he gets promoted. And do you happen to know his promotions, like his jobs, the job titles, or any of that stuff?
Yeah. And within the Air Force, he went to was it a
D9 Master Chief Master Sergeant.
Chief Master Sergeant? Yeah, pretty much
Okay.
as far as
That was his
could go.
final rank in the Air Force, basically, before he retired.
Yeah.
Really?
Then it went black. He retired in 68. We have no record, no official record that he went to the NRO, because they won't release anything. I've tried to get it. But after that, it's all based on what he says he was a part of. And by the way, he was the only one in 2001 before, when he was going to testify with Dr. Greer, he's the only one to mention NRO at the time, but also the ACIO, which nobody would even probably knew what ACIO was, but he mentioned it, and he said that's when you're on that level, and if you have clearance for that level, or if you pay your dues, follow the rules, then your government will have access to that information. So that's what he was saying back then. And that
Okay,
was,
and is that why you guys I saw something that you were talking about wing makers. We never, I don't think, talked about wing makers. I have a whole
yeah,
background with that.
yeah, I asked
So,
a little bit.
is that what piqued your interest? Is his mention of ACIO?
That's kind of where everything started to lead at the end of the day.
Yeah,
That was the last chapter of his book, was the Wingmakers. So
Oh,
yeah.
all right.
Actually,
very interested.
And can you summarize his thoughts on that at all?
Sure, go ahead, Dan. If you want to do it.
oh, he presents the story of the ancient arrow sites and um, the how the ACIO handled the incident and a lot of the information that from the original Waymaker's website that I would be aligned with what he talked about. Um, and he said, now Derek, I believe this was in the book, but he actually there's an individual within the ACIO that they refer to as 15. He claims that he
Right.
had seen this person in
Yeah, in the
at,
80s at NASA, he claimed he saw
yeah.
15 at NASA. And by the way, our grandmother, not our biological, but our step grandmother and our mom were working at NASA in '69 during the Apollo missions. They just happened to be working there.
Oh, right.
They don't relate it to our grandfather in one way or another. They're completely oblivious to the fact that this could have been his actual, occupation and all the things in the book. Our mom's
Why? What do you mean they're oblivious?
I mean, our grandmother never believed it. I asked her before she passed, I was like, do you think he ever was in anything secretive? And she's like, there's no way. There's just no possible way. But if you're on that level, and if you're able to keep a secret for 40, 50 years, then that's your job. And he was obviously good at it if he did.
Well, also, even if he told them or told her, then she would have to pretend that he didn't.
Right.
Right.
So that's fair enough. And I guess they all were trying to protect their kids and so on and so forth. That would be your parents, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, our mom. Yeah.
What's the story with your father? I mean, not to get too personal, but was he alive? Is he alive?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, our father's alive. Yeah, no, it was so it was our mother's father on our mother's side is Daniel Salter, our grandfather who we were talking about. So that was his only real child. So that was
So we
his.
should tell the license plate story because that will explain a lot. A lot. Okay, if you want to have some actual evidence that any of this is true, and we didn't know this until last year, we just started doing interviews with Dr. Sala, other people, and our father was like, "Oh, wait a second, that reminds me of the time I went to the Virginia Norfolk Naval Base, and I was allowed to get on like without any question, no matter what." Like he had the license plate from he basically got the vehicle as a gift from our grandfather, his old van, but his old license plate was still on it. And so he goes to the naval station because he's an engineer, civil engineer, and he needed to speak to someone within there. But all of his colleagues said, there's no way they're going to let you on the base. Absolutely not. Like they'll take an act of God to get on that base. You'll be questioned detained for however long to get on. But he drove through and the security guard just waved him right through as he's driving in the van. So he goes and has this meeting and then on the base. And as he's leaving, he stops and asks the security guard, why did you let me on the base? Like without any question. He's like, oh, it's just because of the license plate. That's all you needed. So there had to be
Nice.
something. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't think personally there's any reason to doubt the guy, to be honest, based on the way you're telling the story. It just sounds logical, and it also is not the kind of thing that anyone did back in those days to try to get notoriety. And certainly they don't go public and then not say anything that is super, groundbreaking or something. Otherwise, what's the point? So and so on. It's interesting that he decided to write a book because that shows a certain degree of commitment, if you will, to getting the story out. But
He in
I
his
don't
book he's
know because I
He's
haven't
not
read the
just a
book.
deep state operative, if that's what you're asking. Like at the
Sorry.
end of his life, he was definitely trying to be like, hey, humanity needs to know this. And he was very spiritual. He actually taught the Rancher book, and he was trying to say, like,
Really?
it's
Okay.
time for this information to come out. We cannot wait. And if we don't say it, if the government doesn't release it, the aliens are going to tell us one way or another. That's what he said at the end of the day.
Yeah, well,
yeah
I
he was
agree with that.
Yeah.
he was
Um,
very passionate about getting the message, like enough is enough kind of thing. He wanted to make sure that the public got the information so that even if it was, um, you know, dumbed down a lot for, his safety and for our safety, um, he felt compelled to make sure that something started, some kind of message got out.
Yeah.
Okay, but did that commitment happen later on when other people were coming forward? And what were the years in which he started to show that sort of dedication to what we might call disclosure? In other words, was this later in his career, after he retired, that kind of thing?
Yes. Yeah. So he started his career in 47, as I mentioned, and this was probably publicly mid 90s when he
Oh,
started coming out with these things. And then Disclosure Project 2001, the book 2003. So it was much later at the end of his life. Yeah.
okay. Okay, interesting. So okay, this is so you think he was perhaps just guessing. You think he might have been a telepath? He might have had psychic abilities,
It's possible, but I mean, I
but
don't.
you don't know that.
We don't know that for sure. No. But
Even though,
you know
a
what?
lot of times when people in a family have sort of psychic abilities, then they say something, even could be just a mundane thing, and they would be right. And then the family becomes aware that that person in the family has certain abilities. Was there anything like that going on around him or not?
I can just tell you this, that this is a person, nothing like that personally for me that would make me think he's psychic, but a friend of ours that's actually childhood friends of ours that grew up with our grandfather. It's a long story in itself that I won't go into the details, but he kind of helped raise them in a way when they're even as young kids. Like, and so my friend was telling me at the age of 6, our grandfather was teaching him how to shoot. And I mean, he knew about guns, obviously. So they're going to shoot. And he said, all right, now close your eyes and just envision hitting the bullseye. And my friend would, he was like, I don't know what you mean, but okay, I'll try it. So he did it, it worked. And my grandfather said, now the reason I'm teaching you at this age is because this is the age where you have no limitations. There's no, you don't have all those preconceived.
Right.
So he knew all about that for sure, based on just what my friend told
Well,
me.
it sounds like he might have had some special ops training, in other words.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Either of you have any one-on-one indication of that?
No, not directly any indication of that kind of capacity within him. He was very spiritual, though I would say like very dedicated to Native American culture in New Mexico, where he lived. Um,
I
Oh,
would
all
only,
right.
I would only say the tie that between us and our grandfather that would steer in that direction is our mom, because our mom's very spiritual. She's an artist. She
Okay.
she has some of the best luck of anybody I've ever known. She's same with my brother who got hit by a train and miraculously is still standing and walking around. So there's certain things that have happened within the family like that, and I think my mom, I don't know, I feel like she doesn't want to even acknowledge it sometimes, but she has, I believe, a lot of angels on her side, and I think maybe we kind of all do, but I don't remember anything directly with our grandfather other than that's the lineage that we have.
Okay. So he lived in New Mexico.
And towards the end, yeah.
Did he live near Los Alamos? Was he in Albuquerque?
House,
Taos,
Sorry,
in Taos,
Taos, New Mexico. Yeah.
house.
Taos, yeah.
All right. So, did he ever talk about Dulcie?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
like I mentioned, we went to Dulce together. Now he wouldn't say, again, he wouldn't go into details like with my brother, but by the time we got to Dulce and before that incident happened, he said, all right, I want you to be, he would just say things out of the blue and he'd be like, I want you to just remember this is a very important place. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of stuff that happened here. And right as he's saying that is when the SUVs come up behind us and say, basically they're threatening to get us to get out of there. So I vividly remember that occasion.
Hmm.
But like I said, not much detail that he would go in with me. But we knew he was obviously
So he
interested.
was your grandfather, but you didn't live with him in the same house necessarily.
Right.
No, so we grew up on the East Coast, and he, you know,
Oh,
yes, he was in Texas and New Mexico for the time that we knew of his life. You know, we always would go out west to visit him. Yeah.
uh-huh. Okay. Was he a pilot?
Yep.
Yes.
So he was a pilot. He used to have one of the hangars that go right to the back of the neighborhood in Dallas or Fort Worth or whatever. I guess that was a popular place where you could actually fly your plane right in behind your house. So our parents remembered him talking about that. But he was like a cowboy. He was the seventh or eighth child of his family and the only one that was adopted. So he became adopted. So I think
Ah,
that's another reason he wasn't like tied to family per se growing up, and he kind of felt like maybe he didn't have any ties to anything. If he needed to be of service or allegiance to whatever operations he was in, then he wouldn't have anything holding him back, I guess.
but your mother was definitely his daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
He was stationed. He was in the Korean War, and he was stationed in Japan. And our grandmother's actually Japanese, so our mother was born in Japan until she was 5. It's kind of a crazy story. And our grandfather thought that he wasn't going to make it back from the war. It was really, really intense. And so while he was over there, there was another man, I think he was from the Navy, that, you know, kind of had the thing for our grandmother, yeah, our Japanese grandmother. And um, our grandfather told him, hey, if you take care of my wife and my family, because I don't think I'm going to make it home. So the other man married our grandmother and brought our mom to the United States. And I believe when she was 7 years old, after a couple of years, our grandfather came back, and he was alive, obviously, and he actually had to adopt his own daughter from this other, from his his wife, this other man. And it was almost like a kind of like a kidnapping when it first happened, and then they made it official with documentation afterwards. But we have like the documents of all of that. It's wild. Um, yeah, but I forgot where we were with the
Yeah,
conversation.
I heard that, I guess, on what I watched previously, but it
Okay.
is a strange twist, you might say. So he goes into the Korean War, he goes through all that, and then he comes back to the US, right?
Mhm.
Has to reassume his life there, even though he thought he might die, right? And then and then was he involved in secret stuff then? Was there any idea that he was, or even aerospace stuff or whatever?
Well, based on when that sighting happened was 1949, and he was in Korea between 50, 52, or early 50s. So he had already seen that first sighting, like within 2 years of his starting the military career, and
Okay.
before he shipped off to Korea or in between going to Korea and Japan. So that was so early in his career. That's why I think he was read in very, 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 very fast. And we don't know why he got into being a Conrad courier and these other cryptographic things, but it seemed like that happened pretty rapidly. Even like he was pushed ahead.
So was he
Because
was
I
sort of a cryptographer?
Yeah, well, and this was for Eisenhower, so this was in the early mid 50s. I mean, it just kind
Early
of
50s, yeah.
trying to put together the timeline. So yeah, he had that crypto clearance at that time. Um, so yeah, and if he was working on these other projects, we don't know exactly the trajectory of it all, but I think it definitely started while he was early in the Air Force.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so I guess I'll stop asking you questions now. Can you tell me more about his story? Like, kind of, because what we see is that he was in a lot of things, and you think he was involved in crash retrievals. You're saying, did he write in his book about the crash retrievals he was involved in?
He mentioned that was part of his whole clearance that he had. His Cosmos clearance was dealing with UFOs, extraterrestrials, and particleization, but the extraterrestrial part was the crash retrievals, and whether it was the concealment, cover up, whatever, the Men in Black portion of that. So he was
So
definitely.
he did say that much.
Yes, yes,
And when was that published?
2003.
2003, yeah.
Fairly recently. And how old was he at that time?
75, just about 75.
Okay. And he just how long ago did he die?
2007. But yeah, like I mentioned, his health was rapidly deteriorating. I had to continually getting these mini strokes, and
Oh,
it was a
And
little rough at the end.
now that we look back at it, it's not hard to believe that once he started to speak about this with Dr. Greer in 2001, he already had a mini stroke. He was already kind of losing it. And I think that's why they kind of put him on the side. Dr. Greer never talks about our grandfather after 20 some years. It's like, well, he was just one of those, but it's not like Greer wants to publicize what he said, because at the end of the day, he never got to say what he was going to say. And he already had mini strokes. He already was kind of declining. So it wasn't a whole lot of good to kind of bring him in the limelight. So we know that.
okay. So maybe he knew he was being targeted at that
Maybe
point.
he was targeted, and maybe that's why he declined from saying what he was saying back then. Yeah.
And so in 2000, Dr. Greer, that's when he recorded, before the press club hearing in 2001, he recorded the testimonies of all the people. So there, if you look at what I originally got as a DVD from the Disclosure Project, he has this whole testimony, and a lot of the material that he talks about is what was his encounters and what he put into the book at that time. So I guess that was the portion that he was felt.
Oh, so he has a chapter in Greer's book, because it was a book before it was a DVD.
Yeah, it's in the book. Yeah, actually, yeah, we have the book too. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, there's a lot more here to dig out. I don't know what you guys have done in terms of, digging and hunting and things. So, well, I know, sorry, I just have a lot of questions, but, so you told me some colleagues that he had. Okay. So did he ever get in arguments or make a big deal about anything? Did he get passionate over anything? In your family or anything like that?
Yeah. About
Nothing.
Yeah, not about the topic in general. I mean, he was just always wanting to say, like, this is happening. He would call me a star seed, a star child as a kid, which is weird because nobody talked like that back then.
Okay.
But yeah, he was passionate about getting this information out, just the topic in general. And he would just say things off the cuff. And that's why, like, my mom and my dad, especially my dad, was just like, well, he loved to talk about aliens. And he was like, yep, yep. And so this is the way things are. And like a matter of factly, this is the way it is, right? So
that's a great way to grow up, is having someone in your family like that, at least from my point of view.
Right.
But anyway, okay. So you guys got together at some point. He wrote his book. He passed on. At what point did you guys start doing your show?
Just around 2020, 2021, right?
Oh, that recently. Okay. So,
yeah.
Oh.
Well, I mean, like I said, we could have been, if this was a scam and we wanted to make money off of a book, which we don't have the rights to, we could have done it right after he published it. But like, of course, we're like, should we even mention this to anybody? We didn't want to mention, of course, we still don't want to mention it to people. We still have a job and a career. We don't want to just say this is, what's
really
happening.
okay. Yeah. Oh, that's kind of like strange. Well, from my point of view, it's a little strange.
I mean,
because
there's been a lot going on, even since you're saying he was in the Stephen Greer Disclosure book and so forth. So it would seem the cat is out of the bag, so to speak. You can have a choice if you believe it or not believe it. It sort of surprises me that you would even question him. Just saying, I mean, somebody's grandfather doesn't just make shit up out of the blue, you know what I'm saying? Especially when they have a military career, like that is fairly well regarded.
It was all very foreign to us because we didn't necessarily grow up. I mean, so 2001, we didn't know he was part of the Disclosure Project. We didn't even know, we hadn't heard of what that was or knew he was there. We didn't find out he was a part of it until his book came out. And at that time, this was like all very brand new. And so we were very skeptical. I mean, there wasn't a lot of other people out there. That the Disclosure Project was the first thing I'd ever seen about, anything publicly about UFOs or and stuff like that. And so it was,
to be honest, Carrie, when I started seeing Project Camelot was when I was like, oh, this might actually be true. Like that's honestly
actually,
started
seriously, Project Camelot, David Wilcock, like all that information started to come out like late what time frame, but at that time was like, okay, now
Well,
we're kind of catching
we
on.
started in 2005.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, it was probably, I think, Derek, you probably started to follow things a little earlier than I, but like
But it took you
2011,
until
maybe.
2020 or
Well, no,
Well,
it was just until we were comfortable to talk about it, like and
yeah,
be like,
that's what I'm saying. I'm just, I'm not trying to criticize you or anything. I'm just on a human level, because I
yeah.
guess you were
oh no, I
brought
was
up in a
trust me,
mainstream kind of a way,
we
if you
were always passionate about it. I've always been passionate about the topic and always felt like there's a connection to this. But when I'll be honest with you, when COVID happened, that's when I said we have to say something. We can't just be
oh,
quiet.
Yeah.
That's
I
when I
would
said
say,
no.
yeah. As we learned more of the stuff and got more into it, like I definitely was like passionate. I was like, yes, I love this book now, and I totally am all for it and everything like that. And this was like, way before 2021, but I never felt, I guess, compelled that I would go public about trying to get it out there or anything like that. That thought actually never occurred to me that we would have a show or anything like that. And like, there were shows about disclosure I didn't really even know. Derek was probably coming to discover this stuff a lot earlier than I did. I didn't know that people actually did this and talked about this until we went to like a Contact in the Desert thing, and I was like, wow, there's a whole world here of things. And then it was 2019 when we had that experience, and then it was like very
Right.
shortly after, it's like, okay, everything's aligning. We have a lot of people actually want to hear this stuff, so let's talk about it and let's move forward with it. Yeah, so it
okay.
was yeah, it was a journey just of us discovering and understanding, and um yeah,
Like
just
if my brother hadn't have been wanting to do it, I probably wouldn't have just tried to go out of my way to do it on my own. It's a big undertaking, but knowing that my brother said, okay, maybe there's something to this, that helped. That definitely helped.
Okay, but what about your mother? So you say she had some psychic ability and so on. I mean, she was his daughter, right?
Well,
Even
she's very
though there was this
spiritual.
some kind of weird break in the family going back in the history, right? So, but you don't think that she followed in his footsteps or even, would acknowledge or talk like, is she still alive?
Yes.
So what is her perspective now?
It's hard to say. I think she's just in a way like as she gets older, she kind of tunes out. Like, okay, well, our parents got divorced as I was graduating high school, and actually when our grandfather went to 2001 hearing with Dr. Greer was when I was graduating. Actually, I don't remember that really well, but my mom was, they were getting a divorce. She actually moved to the Caribbean, like she moved out of the country, like she was just like ready to just kind of say, all right, I'm doing my thing. Like she didn't, and she, like I said, she's spiritual, she's kind of artsy. So it's like she just wanted to live in her world, and she really wanted to be detached from our grandfather as much as possible. It's not like she
Oh,
had to,
really?
yeah,
Okay.
there was not a good upbringing. And I think that's why you skip a generation when it comes to revealing information like this, especially when you're too close to the source. And our mom was too close to the source in ways that probably were not even healthy for her. Or as if you don't feel like you had a good upbringing and you have these memories that you don't want to recall, then why would you want to promote or even
But right now,
inform.
you don't think that, with all the disclosure out there and with all the sort of truth movements, does she have any, you know, focus on? I don't know how old she is at this point, but
she's 73 or 4 now, but she, like Derek said, when she moved to the Caribbean, she pretty much checked out of like mainstream every like no, doesn't subscribe to anything. It's like completely just in
Yeah.
her own world, just
well,
enjoying it.
UFOs are still not really mainstream. So that
Well,
I'm not sure
yeah,
that.
no. I mean, just not even about UFOs, but about
Checked
anything.
out. She checked out of
um,
all of that, even that
yeah,
topic.
just there.
Checked out.
She's on Anguilla. It's like a small island. There's not a lot going on there. But she watches all our shows. She's very much
She watches your
interested in.
shows. Oh,
Yeah,
well,
she
then
she,
she's
she
got
likes all
some
the stuff.
interest.
Yeah, but she in no by no
Did
means
she
is
ever
she
read
compelled.
her father's book?
I think she
Yeah,
has.
at
I'm
some
sure she
point she
has.
has,
Yeah,
but yeah.
I mean, but it's not definitely not a passion of hers. It's not something she wants to. She likes to learn about it as we talk about it, and she shares memories and things like this, but nothing UFO related that she will has had with our grandfather. But she enjoys it, but it's not. She didn't have a passion for it. She didn't have that drive for it, and I think it's what Derek alluded to. So
Okay, so my last question, and then you guys can just talk about whatever you want, is did you or he have any ET experiences growing up, dreams, experiences, that sort of thing?
Well, we were told after the fact that he had encounters. Dan, do you want to say anything on that part about just
About
like you've been told some of the sources that we've had recently talking about?
about our grandfather growing
Yeah,
up, you mean?
yeah, or yeah, what he encountered during his career even, and like the immerther, that was one thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we've recently started to talk about talk to other sources about within the ACIO, and then other secret space program people that say they have files and access to various files have both two independent sources confirm that he was a part of the origination of a lot of the secret soldier, super soldier programs and things like this back in the day. Not collaborating with each other, but they have very similar stories. We've had remote viewers, review. I mean, see certain things of having no idea, double blind remote viewing. This was a Tony Rodriguez in his groups that he has, where they picked up on this, and these people aren't looking at UFOs every day. They were just given a random number, and everything led to like underground bases, UFO technology, some stuff like that. And then we had people who channel and sit and had direct contact with him. Also have very similar stories to what the secret space program people were saying as well. So like a lot of different independent sources, and these are all not, we don't have physical documents or anything like that, but these are all independent sources coming up with very similar stories about his involvement in these black ops programs from the get-go back when MJ12 was starting and things like that. So
Okay, but the question is really more about, did he talk about interaction with ETs, even in dreams or memories? And the same with you guys. Have you had any interaction with ETs?
that's what I thought you were asking. Okay.
Yeah,
There.
I know that was the question I was going to get to my part, but I was going to let you go first. Then,
Oh,
Oh no, go ahead, Derek. You have an experience.
yeah, I
okay.
had an experience that I can't, deny in any way, shape, or form. But as far as our grandfather, we only know from those and sources claiming that he was involved in some way or
I
another.
understand,
Okay,
but
he
not
would
through his own
no, and I don't think he
disclosure.
personally said. But I think the way he was as a man, like he would allude to things. He wouldn't come out right out and say,
Right,
I saw an alien last night," But
right,
the way he talked seemed like it was like they were his buddies, like they're just there. And his answering machine would say, "I'm on the mothership right now. I can't talk, but I'm on the mothership. I'll get back to you." So I mean, the stuff like that. It's like,
right,
Yeah, and he approached it when he did talk about that. His experiences, like it was more, um, it was not very, discreet. Oh, this happened and this happened. It wasn't like telling a story of an event. It's just like his connection on a spiritual level. He was very spiritual about being aligned with the stars and everything like this, and being he talked about Orion belt and everything like that. Like, it was more like on a spiritual level, and that he would like kind of relay where he was from. It wasn't like
okay. Well, where
I
was
had
he from? Did he think he came from another planet?
he said he came from Orion. He would point to
Orion, the
himself,
second star in Orion's belt is what he always talked about. Yeah.
so that was
What is the name of that one? Do you know?
was Betelgeuse basically is the
Oh, all right.
belt, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But you guys, so one of you had an ET experience. You, Derek.
Yes, I wouldn't say it's an ET because as you know from other accounts of Ian Sean David Morton, like there could be terrestrials, Terran raptors or whatever you want to call them. But what I saw was basically I can't describe it other than a standing upright lizard, like coming at like 6 foot at least tall. But I only saw the silhouette of this. And at the time, I didn't know what a reptilian was. I was 15 years old. I never heard of that. But me and my friend that I mentioned earlier, we were both walking outside of my granddad's house in Taos, and you just go across, across the creek on the main interstate, which leads out to the mountains. And we were walking towards the mountains, middle of the night, like 3 a.m. And we were just, just kids messing around. I think he had a gun with him. He wanted to, just see if there's something to shoot at the middle of the night and just go down this highway. So we're walking up the hill, and the full moon's in front of us. So all we see is this figure, a silhouette figure at the top of the hill, which was, I would say, like 100 yards, maybe something like that. And it was coming at us, and it was upright. I was like, what kind of animal would that be? But I could make out like it was like hobbling with the tail behind it. So again, I don't tell this story a lot because it sounds crazy to most people, but that was the most surreal moment where, I saw something and somebody was with me and said, we both just ran. We ran as fast as we could back.
Oh, okay.
So we both saw it. And he even confirmed in the last couple of years, yeah, that happened. He remembers that. So
Okay.
that changes your mindset a little bit. But of course, you just put it aside, until how can you make sense of that until later when some of the other data points line up. So
Okay. And now, I mean, I know I said I wouldn't ask anymore, but this is still part of the same question. So neither of you have had dreams or messages or ET messengers or any of that, even over this time when you've been kind of getting into this material or before?
not really, not really vivid dreams like that, where it's like a direct contact that I'm aware of. Dreams are dreams, but I can't
Right.
recall something like that. Not to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't had that either. I will say, I mean, this is not exactly that, but it's been very interesting. Derek and I we gave a presentation about our grandfather at the Journey to Truth conference back in May. And one of the audience participants, this woman from California, she apparently has a clairvoyant gift, and she was able to see our grandfather. She said at the very end there was like a speaker panel thing, and we were up there with everyone else, and she actually said she saw him there. And since then, that was 5 months ago, she has been in contact clairvoyantly with him like almost every day, and she sends me the messages and things. And the amazing thing is
both a binder of all the information she has about it.
She gets these downloads from him, and it's an amazing connection. And there's a lot of validations, like personal validations, that are like that really just like your heart starts to beat real fast when you hear like some of the stuff's like, wow, how could she? I mean, there's no way she's making this up and knowing exactly this thing. And it's gone. It's not like this was one time session where she read the room or figured out something. No, this is I'm not. She's in California. I'm in Pittsburgh, and it's like she's giving me these messages of, and it's been blowing my mind quite a bit. And there's a lot of like encoded information or something. It's very hard to do. She's not really into all the technical ET stuff and all this stuff, but so there's a lot of things that she doesn't know what he's trying to tell her, but it's very cryptic, I'll say. And so she's very diligent about it, though. She's very passionate about it.
Okay. Well, did you get the impression? I mean, did he arrange this interview, for example? Do you think that he's possibly been trying to reach you and communicate with you to get you guys to do what you're doing?
Yeah. So you're trying to ask a specific question, like, have I had direct encounters with our grandfather, and has he communicated? No, but I know he's with us, and I know that as I collected I'll say this way. I inherited his library of books that he would, all of his books. So I basically could go back and read and see where he marked and dog-eared certain books and really study what he was looking at and then add to that library. But I've been doing that since I was a kid. And the first book he told me to read was The 12th Planet by Zachariah Sitchin. So he's like, if you want to know anything about the way the world really is, read this book. Start with this book as a starting. So that was the foundation of, and I read all of his books, obviously, because he told me this is where the paper trail goes. And trust me, I've gone through a lot of books, but I feel like it is synchronicity, and it's been so synchronistic ever since. And I think he has been a big part of that, somehow telling me something comes up and I'm like, that's important. I need to find the link to that, and I'll find a book and everything starts lining up. And by the way, David Wilcock and what he talks about, it's just amazing that his videos and information tie along so well with what our grandfather said and where this like trail is leading. It's kind of amazing. And David Wilcock also interviewed our grandfather at 2001, which we
Oh,
found
really? Okay. Well, that would be certainly an interesting link to send me as well.
Yeah.
But okay, so last question. Was there anything that he, because Dulce Base is where a lot of the abductees were kept in cages and all of this. Did you perceive any kind of anger, hidden anger or subliminal anger, motivating him to want to tell the story in part because of what might be going on behind the scenes in relation to, the abductions, the forced abductions, etc.?
I'm fairly certain there had to be a big reason also why he wanted to talk.
Yeah.
It felt
And
that.
he kind of touches on that in the book, that he's
Okay.
he's fed up with the way everything's been secretive with the government, and that was why he was so passionate about getting the information out. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So I know we've been going for a while, but now I do want to give you the stage to just speak about anything else that we haven't really touched on or that you feel that we've overlooked. And let's do one at a time. So let's go with Daniel first.
Just to continue that thought, kind of along the same lines of what we were just talking about, like I do feel like with the messages I've been getting from this clairvoyant communication with this woman, like of our grandfather, that he's definitely wants us to keep pursuing this and to get this information out here. It's very clear from the messages that she sent me. And like I said, it's just the validations that make it so real. But yeah, I mean, I think I think we covered most of his story and our journey along the way. Um, besides going through the content of the book, which is all kinds of stuff. um, that I think we've kind of covered that aspect of it. Derek, if you have any other things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't talk a lot about all the things that have happened to me. There's only 3 that I really consider like big events that have happened to me that kind of led me on this path of why I think this is important, or like why it seems relevant. But the other one was, and Carrie, I know you talk about Kundalini a lot, and I had one of those awakenings. I had basically that energetic whatever happened to me, and it was very intense. But it happened actually right after me and my brother went to Contact in the Desert in 2019. And after being around all those people and that community, which we didn't really know even, how big of a movement it was, or I had an idea, but I never had been immersed in it and really got to see, what a family it felt like when you are in the core of that group of people. And we met Laura Eisenhower there, and she also helped spark our inspiration to talk. To be honest, but I met a lot of other people there too. And just coming back from that, I was on it was euphoric, I guess you'd say. But I guess that energy helped activate something with me, because that night I came back, I had like a full-blown Kundalini, and it was very intense. It lasted for like 10 minutes. And but anyway, that was one of those points in my life, was like, okay, there's something to this. There's a reason why you went to this event. There's a reason why you're looking for answers about our grandfather. And that really propelled me and us to kind of start this journey too. The only other thing that happened, which is I don't like to tell the story so much because it's controversial, because it had to do with using an Ouija board. And I know that sounds crazy, but I was trying to contact our grandfather because I knew friends that knew how to use the Ouija board. It's not a toy. I don't recommend doing it and I wouldn't do it again. But I did it because these people that I was with used it on a regular basis to communicate with family. It was like just a natural thing to them. And they could actually have conversations with their family. And I was there to witness this. I know they weren't just trying to make something up. They were literally conversing with their dead relatives. So I said, well, let me try our grandfather. I've been trying and trying. Tried a couple times. This last time I tried it, and it was with the woman and her 2 daughters. They were all related, and they were women. And I think that has something to do with when you do this. But we obviously cleansed the room. We were like, you know, a protective space that we wear when we did this. But because I couldn't get to our grandfather, I asked for JFK. And lo and behold, I get a lot of feedback, and I start asking very specific questions, and I got a lot of interesting information back. And we've done shows about this, and I don't say it lightly. I mean, this is stuff that's, you know, I can't deny what happened. If people don't want to believe me, that's fine. But we definitely had some information come through when I did that. And it's really relevant, I think, today to what's going on with.
Okay, but it wasn't about your grandfather.
It wasn't, but because I was trying to contact him and I couldn't, that led me to that. And that was the only other
Okay,
kind of anomaly that happened in the course of my life that was kind of out there. So,
sure. Okay, well, thank you guys. It's very interesting, I'm sure. Now, I do have an audience here. I don't know if they have any questions, but everyone who's in the chat, if you want to, if there's any questions before we wrap up here. And I hope you'll share those couple of links, links to his book, links to, you said there was a video of him talking. And also, if you could also share the link to the David Wilcock interview with your grandfather.
well, that's actually not an interview that was ever put out. We just know, I only know that from David Wilcock talking about it. And even in his books, he's referenced our grandfather a few times, but we know he talked to him. And I'm still trying to get in hold of David Wilcock. If you happen to still be in touch with him, it would be great to get, you know, firsthand. You know,
we saw him briefly at that contact in the desert, and he said, we told him we showed him the book, and he was like, yes, I remember your grandfather. We talked about it, I interviewed him and everything, like, but you know, since then we haven't been able to re-establish connection with David. So
that's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, because it's still a mystery. I would say there's lots of gaps there. And it seems like, you know, there would have been colleagues. Have you ever met colleagues, that kind of thing?
no, I mean, again, it's not like he had a handler or he didn't have anybody that he was talking with at the end of his life.
You say he was friends with, you know, Phil Schneider, you know, some of these people. So, but
yeah, the ones that were killed. So obviously they're not
okay.
But no,
But nobody who came and hung around the house or that was known to your family, et cetera, et cetera.
No, not later on in life.
Or could you have overlooked that person? Maybe you don't know. Maybe he was just a family friend, and maybe that friend was also part of the whole.
I mean, yeah, I mean, at our point in time, we were teenagers. We only saw him like once a year in the summer. You know, we didn't have to see him. So it was, yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Well, okay. So I would suggest, just for more investigation, you might go back to your mother and find out growing up, who were his friends, who were his colleagues, you know, who was a work buddy, or, you know, some innocuous person.
Gary, believe me, I've tried.
No good. Oh, all right. Oh, well. Yeah. All right. Well, very interesting case, and certainly great to have that exposure. And I'm glad that you guys at least are pursuing it. I hope that some more information will come forward, because it sounds, you know, like there's so much more, so much sketchy, you know, it's very sketchy. So, you know, it'd be really nice to get more information. Do you have any hidden boxes stowed away, your mother's house, that kind of thing? Anything
actually do.
like that?
So I do. I have a storage unit that I don't know, this was like maybe 2000.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that might be a good place to, you know, bring a psychic along.
Well, Dan, you've got to mention the fact that this woman who says she's in contact directly with him, and he's pointing to the storage unit and saying, here. Like, so it's been communicated.
Well, that'd be great to get some evidence that way. You know,
so there's a lot to look through. I barely scratched the surface. There's plenty to dig into there. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because everything leaves a trail. It could be the most innocuous trail you may not realize.
Right.
It brings to mind a thing that happened when I was a kid. Okay. And so I was the only kid that got this wine bottle that was given to my parents that was inscribed for my 21st birthday with my name and everything, and a special gift from a special friend. Never learned anything about the person, whatever, but open this, saying open this when she is 21. And it was like when I was born, right? Gave a bottle of wine, a special bottle of wine, very unusual situation. So, in other words, that is like a trail, you know what I'm saying, that you can follow. And there are little tiny things that might seem insignificant that you can follow a trail, so.
Yeah, my intention is to kind of document as I go through these boxes, kind of try to document, photograph as much as I can, and just have it so that we can have it access to it, so we can look back at it and see if we can piece something together. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, very good. Come back to me if you have more in the future, and I'm sure my audience would also be very interested to hear more. Okay. So thanks for being on the show, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. And yeah, so if you also, because we put your link to your YouTube, do you also have an email that you can send me, like however you like to be contacted by the public? Because there might be some people with, maybe they knew your grandfather, or maybe they, would
Absolutely.
be asking questions or want to talk to you.
Yep, I'll send that to you as well.
Okay, so we'll put that under the video if you send it to me. All right.
Great.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, guys. Yeah, let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. So, Carrie, I in the chat, in the Zoom chat, I sent you some things.
Oh, she's on mute. She's still there. Yeah, that's a good email. So we can send that.
I don't know.
I don't know if she's still there, but I could probably send some of the
Well,
documents.
let's send it via email. All the stuff that the email address that I have, the link to the book on Amazon that people can get. The only other thing is the video footage. What I think I'll do is I'll put on our channel, on our YouTube channel, the clean version that's been cleaned up so you can hear it better. The stuff we have up there now is all the original stuff.
Okay. Yeah. I guess she's gone from here, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I don't know. This is going to be on the show. I guess I'm running the credits right now on the screen. But so guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you sound like you have some links and things for me, but I can't get them off of the Zoom. So because I have to close this down right away. So if you can send them to my email, which is carrie@projectcamelot.tv. And you can also text them. I use phone text all the time. So you can use that for sending me stuff. And anything you can send me that I can then share with the public, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Carrie at Project Camelot. Yep. All right. Got it. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hope to talk again. Bye.
Right.